Hi, thanks for listening in to this brief PowerPoint. My name is Scott Vos, and I'm a cost estimator and risk analyst for Tetra Tech. Much of my experience has been developing cost estimates on U.S. Army Corps civil works design projects. Through my experience, I've gained a good amount of insight into a pretty important process that the Corps has developed over the years that I'm sure many of you have been involved with or have at least heard of, and that is the cost and schedule risk analysis. So in this presentation, I'm going to briefly define cost and schedule risk analysis. I'll provide a brief overview of the process, discuss some of the outputs, and finally discuss some of the benefits and important reasons for why completing this type of analysis on any project, regardless of core involvement, and how that may be beneficial to you. So our starting point is a definition of the cost and schedule risk analysis. It is a formal process of documenting and/or quantifying potential project risks that could impact a project's costs and/or schedule. In our definition here, we should also discuss risk in terms of the CSRA process, and risk is defined as an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, has a positive or negative effect on a project's objectives. Now, the CSRA process was developed by the Corps. The primary purpose for its development was to help improve the contingency values used on their cost estimates. Since its development, the CSRA has now become mandatory on any project in excess of $40 million. However, there is also a simplified risk analysis process called the abbreviated risk analysis, and this can be completed for projects under $40 million. And lastly, the CSRA process was developed to incorporate qualitative and quantitative information. So once it is determined that a project requires a cost and schedule risk analysis, what is the actual process? First would be to have some level of design, a cost estimate, and a project schedule to set as baselines. These documents can be at any phase of your project, from conceptual alternatives to final design for construction. Once you have those baseline documents, the next step is to develop the primary document of the risk analysis process, and that is to develop a risk register. A risk register is basically a list of potential risk items that could cause a change to the cost or schedule. Now, the Corps typically requires this risk register to be developed through quite significant meetings that are intended to include full project development team members. This could include engineering staff, real estate, environmental, project management, contracting, etc. They're all expected to be involved with the risk register development, such that all the areas that these staff members cover are included in the risk register. Typically, during the risk register meeting, the project development team would also qualitatively assess the risks for their chance of occurrence and for their potential impact to the cost or the schedule. These qualitative assessments are important as they help separate out the higher level risks from the lower level ones, which then comes into play in the quantitative assessment. This part of the process involves a risk analyst or cost estimators looking at the high risk items and quantifying dollar values as well as schedule delay durations that could occur if a given risk is encountered. Lastly, these quantified values are then entered into Oracle's Crystal Ball program, which is a statistical modeling software that applies a probabilistic approach to estimating contingencies for cost and schedule. And here are some of the outputs from the analysis. The top table simply shows the final contingencies for a project in terms of cost. We're used to seeing contingency values, but this analysis also provides a contingency value on your schedule. So there's a potential month increase that's determined in this analysis. The table on the bottom left shows different contingency values for various confidence levels. Typically, we use the 80% confidence level. It's pretty standard for this process, but There is room to make different choices depending on your project's needs. Lastly, another valuable chart is called the sensitivity chart, and that's on the bottom right. This chart shows us what risks are contributing the most to the contingencies. So it basically ranks the risks in the model from highest to lowest in terms of how much they drive the contingency values. And this can be beneficial in that it can provide insight into where mitigation strategies should be focused. So why would this process be beneficial to projects beyond the core? First, it defines potential project risks. If this process is completed early, then your project will likely have a better chance of mitigating these risks that you've developed. Second, your project would have a project-specific contingency. It would not just be a shot in the dark or typical percentage like 25%. Thirdly, this process often leads to discussions of mitigation measures for key risks. So mitigating risk is valuable to any and all projects. Lastly, if the process is followed and potential risks are able to be mitigated, then hopefully you reduce your risk of unexpected cost and schedule increases that could mess with budgets, funds, could mess with key dates that your project needs to meet. So hopefully this process reduces risks of that unexpected impacts. Some other potential benefits for completing this analysis include the fact that the full process is flexible. There are some key components like developing the risk register that are pretty standard to all risk analyses, but other things, other parts of the analysis can be substituted or removed or modified to better fit a project's needs and a project's budget. This analysis can also be completed at any stage of the project development timeline. Often the earlier the better, as the project development team would have more time to incorporate any mitigation strategies, which leads into the next point in that the CSRA process provides a framework for risk and mitigation strategies to be followed for the duration of the design process. The developed risk analysis should be a living document and should be regularly reviewed and updated as a project progresses. And hopefully your risk lessens as your project moves forward and as you effectively mitigate any potential risks. And lastly, it removes those rule of thumb contingencies. As noted previously, a contingency developed through a CSRA process is project specific. So the estimated contingencies will vary from project to project, but hopefully they will better account for actual contingency needs. So thanks for listening in on this quick presentation. Here, my contact info is provided, and please follow up with any questions or anything we may be able to help out in regards to cost and schedule risk analysis. Thank you.